Jackal, another day, another FPL pod with a little lead in. Today we're talking about hits. So kind of selfishly, but also for everyone's interest, are hits worth it?
Great question, Josh. Yep. Hello. Good to be back doing another vid. Been a little while, but yeah, great to be back chatting FPL stuff. One of the timeless questions of FPL, Josh, this isn't it? One of the eternal, some might say unanswerable question of should you take a point hit, a -4 hit or more in any given game week when you're looking at your transfers. So yeah, excited to get stuck in. We've got some like general opinions and some actual data, thankfully, on this to back up our baseless opinions. So yeah, looking forward to it, man. What we're going to talk about running order wise?
Well, as you said, we've got a bit of everything to add into the argument. Hopefully, come to a conclusion, which is evidence based a bit. But what we're going to do is going to cover the scenarios in which people will take hits. We need that to lay the groundwork.
Yeah.
When are people taking hits? Why they're taking hits? Then we're going to look into a bit of the maths. Like how do we categorize a viable kind of hit taking? Like when does it play off? When does it not? And then very kindly, you've got some stats from our mini league, and we're going to look at some data against like players that take hits, managers that take hits versus like how do they perform in the mini league that we've got and overall. And then hopefully after all of that, reach a conclusion.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, good stuff. And yeah, I'm interested because you're a bit of you're a self-proclaimed kind of conservative manager. So maybe this will change up your opinion a bit, Josh, on whether you'll be hit averse or not. Or maybe it will just make you more hit averse, double down on your cowardly nature and just make you avoid hits even more in future. So let's see what happens. So let's get right into it. So scenarios to take a hit. So this is what we think are when people take hits generally, why they do it. So should we go through these, Josh? So when do you think people take hits generally? When do you take a hit?
So me, as you said, I'm quite risk averse. Don't like taking hits. So injuries are a big one for me. If you've got an injury, and that could be, you've got 11 players that are going to be playing in that game week, but maybe they're a bit rubbish. The ones coming off the bench are a bit rubbish. You're thinking, I've got weak replacements here. I'm going to need to take a hit to bring in some actual decent assets. Obviously, the other thing about that is maybe later on in the season, if your team's not looking great and you're trying to get to a wild card, you may not even be able to field 11 players. And then you're like, okay, I definitely need to take a hit or two here to get those 11 starting players. So injuries in general.
Yeah, I mean, that seems from a kind of intuitive perspective, that seems like the most locked in time to take a hit, doesn't it? Is when you're fielding 10 players anyway. So a hit is actually in that case worth 2 points because you weren't going to get any points if you didn't take the hit. So already you're getting the 2 appearance points from someone you bring in. So it's that +2. That +2 factor. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm the same. If there's an injury, or I'd add, if there's, someone's going to be dropped. So if they've said in a press conference, well, this guy's not going to play this week, or we're rotating this player, then that's as good as an injury, isn't it? That's just like, we know this player's not going to play. Let's get him out. I guess the only thing with that is if they're just dropped for rotation, they might play the next week. So taking a hit in that sense might be a bit short term because they're going to come back into the fold a week later. But with an injury, they're done for a few weeks. So yeah, I agree with that. What about though when you're replacing a playing player, Josh? Why do you think people take hits when they're replacing someone who is going to start? Why do you think people do it?
There's a few here, and I think there's some things like freeing up cash for planned transfers comes to my mind. So that's like where if you're planning ahead a little bit, or a big asset, a premium asset that maybe you don't have, has a great run of fixtures, maybe in 2 or 3 game weeks, and you're thinking suddenly because of price rises or just how you are, you're not you're not set up to be able to afford that player for the players you want to get rid of. So maybe you want to take a hit to free up cash in anticipation for transfers, like planning ahead, basically.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's a good one. Yeah. I mean, it comes to patience, that, doesn't it, for me? Because I think people are, I guess with these, we'll kind of merge into more psychological biases and stuff. But I find it really hard to roll a transfer. If I know I've got that planned move of 2 players, it's just so nice. It just feels so much nicer to be like, no, I'll do it this week. Oh, it'll cost me -4, but I'll just do it this week. I'll just do it this week. And then I've got those 2 players in my team rather than rolling it and doing it for free the next week, which is probably the better call. But it's just horrible, isn't it? That's our human minds, and people are better than others at it. But we're just far better at, we're way more inclined to go for the here and now than invest for the future, aren't we? Generally.
I want it now. It's that age, isn't it? We want everything now. Give it to me.
Yeah. There was that famous experiment they did with kids, wasn't there, where they put the kids in a room and there was like a sweet on the table. And they were like, right, you can eat the sweet now, but if you wait 15 minutes, you can have 2 sweets. And like the majority of the kids just eat the sweet, even though they want to. That's the classic take a hit mentality.
Maybe the scientists lied to you. Maybe you eat that one and you're going to get another one later anyway.
Yeah, maybe that's what they were thinking. Yeah. Who would deprive a kid of a sweet? In this case, we know we're getting that extra transfer next week, so I don't know, strange. But no, you're right about those plans of freeing up cash to buy players. That is a reason people take hits. You've also put here, Josh, tell me what you mean by this mini league game week win strategy, hits to build a single game week focused team.
So this is if you're in a mini league, and this is reasonably common, I believe, where you've got a mini league that has weekly prizes, so cash prizes or whatever. So there is an actual incentive, a big incentive to win a game week. And what you generally could see towards the end of the season, we see it a bit in our mini league, the one that you administrate for us, Jack, is later in the year, if they're not in for the overall win, then they're just like, all right, I'm going for weeklies now, and just taking hits galore left, right, and center to not maybe win that game week, because obviously you got all the minus points, but the one after, or if there's going to be doubles or blanks or whatever. So they're basically taking a bunch of hits to target one game week.
Yeah. Exactly. And it never works. It never seems to work. So just expanding on what you say. So we run one where there's £15 for a weekly win. And people that have a terrible start, or they've just given up, or they come into it later in the season, think, right, well, I'm not going to win the full thing, so I'll go for these weekly prizes. So they effectively give themselves a wild card every other week, don't they? By just taking however many hits one week to set them up for the next week. But weirdly, just never seems to pay off for them. I'm thinking of certain people that have done that in the past that we both know. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I've added a couple here of just panic/anger. So rage, if it hasn't gone well for you, if a player's annoyed you one too many times, or they get red carded, then it's that knee-jerk rage. You can just go for a hit, can't you? That Sunday afternoon anger has got to us all in the past. I'd say that's probably one of the worst times to take a hit if you're thinking about it. And then another one, we touched on it, but the double game week scenario, or a blank game week scenario. If it's, especially if it's one of those weeks where only a couple of teams have double game weeks, then taking a hit to bring in a player for that week again can be viewed as a sort of short term, more of a -2 than a -4, because you know they're going to get double the appearance points. And I've certainly done that in the past, taken that gamble on, okay, this player's featuring twice instead of once. I'll pay a little -4 in the hope that they pay me back in that double. In that double. So yeah, I mean, I think those are the main, I think we've covered the main kind of times where you think to yourself, okay, I'll do a -4 here because of X, Y, Z. I mean, this video is meant to be viewed at any time, obviously. Evergreen in 2030. I hope you're still watching this and it's relevant. But as it happens, the game week we're in now, I was very close to taking a hit to bring in 2 players. So to bring in Zaha and Jesus for Son and another player. And it happened that, and I resisted, and it happened that Zaha was injured and Jesus got 1 point. So I was glad I didn't take the hit. But yeah, it's in seasons gone by, I definitely would have taken that hit, I think. So that's me being a bit more patient.
Balanced. I like it, Jack. There you go.
Yeah, very good. So yeah, I mean, are there any more that we've missed? Any other times you've taken a hit in the past when that we kind of haven't covered?
Not comfortable. I think you can put it into broad categories, can't you? Like knee jerk, that's the panic, anger, impatience, etc. Like where you're not really thinking about it, you've just done it on instinct without thinking. You just like, I don't want this player, I'm getting them out, or I really want that player, they're coming in. I don't care what it takes. Or planned to a lesser or greater degree. So like I'm taking a hit because I want that player, or I'm taking that hit to a greater planned degree because there's a double game week or a blank or whatever. But I can't really think any other examples would probably fit into one of those kind of broad categories anyway.
Before we look at the evidence, Josh, and the maths, do you, and I'll ask you 2 things. So one, do you think broadly taking a hit is a good or bad thing? Like very, very broadly. If someone was like, I might take the hit this week, without knowing anything else, would your advice be lean towards do it or don't do it?
Coming into this pod, you said at the beginning, Jack, risk adverse. I'm generally the -4 is rarely worth it. Only in my mind, only for that kind of I can't field 11 or the double. I really need this player, and the mass changes a little bit in that scenario, doesn't it? Because the double game, because you explained. Only for like the most kind of severe scenarios am I thinking I'll take the 4. That's my stance. What about you?
Generally, a hit averse is what you'd say. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be the same. I've always thought, and we'll touch on this in the maths as well, that a hit early on in the season is better than a hit later on. And I'll go into why I kind of feel like that in a minute. But my other question to you is, how many points would you pay for another wild card?
Oh, if I could say, oh, I'm giving you this many points and I get a full wild card.
Sacrifice of points for another wild card. How many points would you say?
Jeez. I'm trying to imagine a scenario in which I would want it that much.
Yeah.
I want another wild card that much. It wouldn't be high for me. It would probably be like not much more than 12.
Yeah.
Considering, that's only what 3 players worth and you're getting a whole team. I still think anything more than 12 is just
it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's high risk, as you said. Like you think that you always imagine that the moves you're making are nailed. Like you give the Zaha Jesus example, and again, this is evergreen, but everyone's got those type of examples from when they've played in the past, and you think that is nailed. These guys are gonna bang, and the guys that I've got in my team are gonna blank. They're gonna be terrible, and it just sometimes it just flips on its head, doesn't it? The difference between one game week is huge in the Premier League.
It really is. It really is.
So 12 points is mine.
12 is Josh's price for
it's low, isn't it? Yeah. What about yours?
It is low, yeah. I would have said more 16, 20, I think, to pay. But then, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because on a wild card, it's rare that when you wild card, do you get rid of all your players and bring in all a new 14, isn't it? Sometimes it is just 5 or 6 that you swap. So as you said, then the -12, -16 is kind of, that's what you could spend players anyway. Yeah. So yeah. So does that then follow that if you wanted to swap out 4 players, you wouldn't wildcard? Because that's the -12. You just spend the -12 and keep the wildcard.
If that wildcard's free. Or
no, I mean, so as it is now, so say that you would save your wildcard if it meant spending -12, would you?
I wouldn't spend the -12. This is demonstrating
You wouldn't spend it.
how
Exactly.
meta point
Yeah.
I might take a 4 and I'll just keep my shit
Yeah.
players for
Maybe it's
2
even
game
lower.
weeks.
Yeah, maybe it's
Yeah,
even lower. Anyway, that's interesting because I'm broadly the same. Like it just looks a -12 just looks hideous, doesn't it?
I
It
hate
just
it.
feels wrong. Feels just disgustingly wrong. And I felt that before looking at these, before kind of delving into the numbers a bit more.
Uh-oh.
So let's talk a bit more about numbers then. So what you see a lot is the incoming player needs to get +6 points in the immediate game week to make that hit worth it, don't you? That's all you see. 6 more than the player you took out, or 4 more than your player you took out, so 6+. But really, that isn't true, is it? Because I mean, it is true in that very simple sense that if you take a player out for -4, the player that coming in, you'll want to beat them in points +4 is what people think, isn't it? But really, and this touches on what I said a minute ago, actually, a player you bring in, you don't need, there's no reason you need that -4 to be paid off in the next week. You know, if that player then goes on to score 50 more points than the player you took out, then actually the -4 looks brilliant. That's a price worth paying, isn't it? And that's kind of why I prefer taking hits early in the season, because I kind of see it as they've got more weeks to pay me back. Whereas if I take a hit in game week 37, they've got 1 week to pay me back, and that's less likely. But if I take a -4 in game week 1, well, 37 more times for you to sort me out, mate. But to get 37, you got 1 more time. So that's kind of how I see that. And I think that's sound, is it? Does that make sense?
Well, the only counter argument I'd give there is, we're still looking at it 1 game week versus, the hit price. What if you're just making that move 1 week later?
Well, that comes, so you could make it for free later. So I guess what that brings in is another kind of hidden benefit to taking a hit, I think, is that it kind of puts you ahead of the curve, and next week's transfer will be, you're almost buying another transfer. Well, you are literally buying another transfer -4, but then next week you can address another problem. Whereas if you avoided the hit, you're
dealing with yesterday's problem.
You're dealing with last week's problem, the next week. Whereas you've probably got another fucking problem from the shit show that was the last game week. So it kind of, and again, doing that early lets you, especially when we just don't know what form is for which players at the start of the season. It's sort of it's buying you time as well as a sort of free transfer, isn't it?
So more proactive than reactive. So you're just kind of like well, it's all reactive anyway, isn't it? Because obviously you're trying to do it after the fact, or you're trying to maybe say that this player passed the eye test, the stats aren't quite there, or whatever. But ahead of the curve is probably the right description that you're looking at, isn't it? You're getting ahead of everyone else potentially, but you're paying a price for that. That's that point.
Yeah, you are. I mean, and it's that short-termism again. It's like sometimes when a friend says, I'm going to take a -8 here to bring in XYZ, my instinct is to go, well, just wait, maybe just roll it a week, man. Like, you don't know this player's terrible that you're taking out, chill. But actually, I'm not sure it is that bad a thing. So covering those. So what, preparing for this pod, we both kind of realized, didn't we, that there isn't actually that much raw analysis out there of numbers of this question, even though it's one of the most asked questions, I would say, anecdotally amongst people that play FPL. It's like, do I take the hit or do I don't take the hit? Right? Like, it is a common question.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, I'd say most managers have it every week.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem is obviously there are every little scenario is different. So sometimes it's broadly, I think the broad opinion is sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And then people kind of leave it there. Like, it depends on your team. But I feel like that is a bit of a cop-out in terms
Massively.
It's just like you could answer any question with that, couldn't you? Like, should I wildcard now? Well, it depends on your team. See you later. Like, thanks a lot. That's useful. So Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, Josh, we run a league with 40 players in. So it is a small sample size still, but I've got the past 3 seasons worth of data in terms of how many everybody's recorded hits. So every week, like a fucking loser, I tally up how many hits people have taken and keep a running total of that. And I've done so for the past 6 seasons. And so for the past 3 seasons, I've essentially created these graphs that show correlated points with hits taken for the entire season. So it shows how many hits people have taken and compared to their points, and we can see if there's a positive correlation or a negative correlation based on points hits. And this, because there's 40 players, there's different playing styles. So there's, like you said, Josh, there's people going for the weekly win sometimes. There's really uber conservative players that never take a hit. There's a couple of players that give up and so they never take a hit. Or there's players that they're really active, but they just take hits like absolute madmen. So it's quite a good mix of styles, I think. So before I show you these, Josh, what would have been your guess as to that correlation? Would you have said, well, more hits on average, more hits means lower points in total, or vice versa?
I think less hits, more points. I would imagine that for every tactical, thought out hit taker, there's a madman throwing hits out there for the Zahas before they get injured. So I would say broadly, like generally speaking, less hits will be more points and higher overall rank.
I would have completely agreed with you. Completely agreed. Exactly. Like the more hits you're taking, you're just not planning for the future. It's not long-termism. It's like buying individual stocks rather than just buying an index fund. Like wrong move. But which is why I was shocked, Josh, to see that actually in 21-22, there was I'd say a fairly strong correlation between hit takers and points totals. So broadly, the more hits that were taken, the better a player did in the league that year and had a better overall points total. 2021, there was basically no correlation. So you couldn't say, and I'll be flashing these up on the screen now, these charts, but there was just no correlation. Like you couldn't ascertain how well a player did by how many hits they'd taken. You know, if that's all the data you'd had, you just wouldn't be able to tell, which was interesting there. And so on these charts, the line to be looking at is that line of best fit, because this is the overall score for each of these players, ordered by the amount of hits they've taken. So that if that line is going upwards, it means that more hits is good. If it's going down, it means that more hits were bad. So 2021, there was sort of no correlation, but 1920, there was a major correlation. The more hits you took, the better you did. So yeah, I mean, I will say there was one. Oh, actually, I've messed up the date on that one a bit. But either way, it's neutral to positive for these years gone by, which I just found fascinating to see. Like really, really interesting to see, which, as you say, Josh, would have been just the opposite of what I would have guessed.
Yeah. So I guess, like you said, that the data doesn't show us in what scenario or what reason they took the hit. And actually, it just came to me there, as you were saying, the years that the first two were probably impacted a little bit by like the COVID change of fixtures and stuff as well, which may favor slightly the hits. But last year, there's no reason why that should favor hit takers in my mind from, a rational perspective. So it almost doesn't matter that we know the reason behind not taking it. I would still imagine that the madmen going for the weekly win would skew the data so that it would still be negative for the hit takers, but we're not seeing that.
I do agree. I guess the madmen's difference is the abandonment. Like at the ends of the scale, you got the madmen minus 12 every week. And the opposite to them is just the players that have abandoned the team. So who will just never take a hit or make a transfer, even if their team's on fire. So maybe they kind of balance each other out. I don't know.
But
I
it
mean,
is quite a that that argument as well, saying that that may skew data over the whole FPL game,
yeah,
but for the mini league, like it's 40 active players. It's quite a competitive league, isn't it? Like even the more inactive players or passive players, you'd say we don't have any inactive players, but the more passive players are still going for the wins and everything like that.
oh, they are 100%. Yeah, 100%. So in that league last season, there was actually only one guy didn't take any hits at all. I'm trying to see where
Zero.
you are actually, because you normally don't take many, do you?
If I get frustrated, then
Minus 44 you took last year, Josh. That was huge for you. 11 hits.
got frustrated. Got
You
frustrated.
did, you clearly did. But yeah, so one guy took no hits, and the highest hit taker in our league took 104, minus 104 hits.
Jeez.
But interestingly, their points different. So the guy who took the crazy amount of hits got 2,253 points, and the guy who took 0 hits got 2,179 overall points. They were both engaged, but it just shows. Really, it shows that there's so many different ways to play. Like really different ways to play. And the guy who won our league last year actually completely smashed it. He took not minus 96 worth of point hits, ended on 2,579 points, which is outrageous. Which is a really good score, but minus 96. I mean, crazy high hits. So
God, we just stop referring to them as madmen because they're actually maybe the same ones.
Exactly. Maybe they're not mad, Josh.
I
think it really this data does show that hits are not a bad thing at all, and far less bad than I had originally imagined, I suppose. I mean, I guess when you look at a -4, like 4 points as a percentage total of your overall score in a season isn't a lot, is it? So, I mean, what is it? So say you finish on 2,300 points. That's pretty kind of average for a good manager, I would say. What's the maths I need to do here? So 4 divided by that, isn't it? 4 divided by 2,300. Is that right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's less than, it's 1/10 of a percentage of your points that you're giving up. When you look at it like that.
And I think, as maybe you said, when you take a step back and you look at that argument that you put forward before, this kind of shines a light on that now, that the ability to get ahead of the curve. And maybe like when you hear other people and other podcasts refer to them and say that, good managers are saying middle to the back end of the season, you need to be a bit more aggressive. Yeah, like by all means go template at the beginning. But as the price rises, the volatility of the price rises are out of the way, and you start seeing, where the doubles and how the form of teams and stuff, and long-term injuries to teams, etc. Like that's when you've got everything to hand, all the data to hand, and be a bit more aggressive and start like getting ahead of the curve and getting those differentials in before they become template or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, certainly looking at this, it's going to make me far less reticent to take a hit, I think.
And this is coming off of the back of this week, which we're mid game week, and I rolled this week. So yeah,
me too. Yeah, there you go. Like I said, I didn't take the hit, and it didn't pay off for me in this short term. But again, interestingly, maybe Jesus and Zaha next week will smash it, and that'll actually make me not taking the hit this week a bad move. I'll have forgotten. By that point, I'll have forgotten that was the move I would have made, and I'll be patting myself on the back for saving the 4 points. But if Zaha and Jesus kill it, I've actually lost 16, 20 points because of it.
Or you get an injury crisis in the interim, or someone else pops off that you want, and suddenly you've got you don't have Jesus and Zaha, and you still also have to deal with these new fires that all at the same time.
Yeah, if I only had Jesus and Zaha, then I wouldn't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
And I can deal with these fires, exactly. So yeah, the more I think about it and the more you look at just the data, I think a hit is a good thing. A lot of the time. Certainly with the injuries and stuff, but maybe just when you want better players. Maybe you shouldn't just limit yourself to the strict rules of, oh, if I can only field 11 players or whatever.
Nice.
Interesting. I'd love to just see the overall 9 million players worth of data on it, you know? I'd just love to see that and what the actual trend line was. Because again, that is just a sample of 40 managers. So yeah.
Yeah, but it's an outcome or results that I did not expect to see. I thought it'd be quite heavily in favor of not taking the hits. So
Never to play, yeah.
God,
Yeah.
I have to
The
think
other
through
thing is, I
this more.
suppose, with because a lot of one thing you see sometimes is, oh my God, the world number one who's won it has never taken a hit. Incredible. Therefore, taking a hit's a bad move. But actually, the world number one has probably gotten so lucky with their picks that they don't need to take a hit because they've got all the players. That's why they're number one. So I wouldn't view that as a sign that says taking a hit is a bad thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and in the same way, the top player in our mini league, as you said, was a heavy hit taker. Doesn't necessarily mean that you should be taking hits left, right, and center, but
True.
it does reframe the mind a little bit. And I think it will definitely reframe my mind a little bit that if you're on the edge of making a transfer and it all makes sense to you, and the only reason you're not making it this week ahead of next week is because of that hit, then maybe just do it.
Yeah.
Nike, just do it.
I think so, especially early in this season when we're still figuring out form and who is good and who's bad, who's going to play, who's not. And we haven't mentioned price rises. So that's another reason some people do it, isn't it? To catch a price rise of a player that they see is going up, or avoid a price drop of a player they want to get rid of that would wait a week. And I think maybe we should do another video on team value and actually how important is team value, because I think that has a lot of different opinions about it, doesn't it? Of how actually important that is. So maybe we leave that for another day. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, thanks for that, Jack. Putting the stats together. That is God, back to the drawing board for me. Jeez.
Take some hits, guys. Take those hits. Yeah. So I think, in conclusion, a hit is not a sin, is it? That's probably our conclusion there. They're not inherently bad moves at all. And they're a useful tool, a useful thing for us.
Hit isn't a dirty word, folks.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that the -4, I wonder how they decided -4 was the amount, because it does seem like a very good, it seems like the perfect amount to make you question it, but also make it not completely unappealing, doesn't it? Like if it was -5 or 6, people might be like, oh, but if it was -2, we'd be hitting all day, I think.
Yeah, it's like double the blank, isn't it? And for like defenders, like even a clean sheet just gets you even for the week. And a goal for a striker just gets you even for a week.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Good. All right. So yeah, to conclude, don't be afraid of hits, guys. Hit away.
Hit away. And we're just going crazy now.
yeah. This is just our secret plan to tank everybody's ranks this season for us, Josh.
Thank you. All right, overall rank.
But good.
Cheers for that.
Yeah, good to be back making another video. We'll be we've taken a little break, haven't we? But we'll be back now with kind of more frequent ones.
Yeah, week to week, check out TikTok. That's obviously the more what's going on in the day-to-day of FPL, like the transfers and injury news and our teams, etc. So head over to that TikTok for that kind of news. But we're using YouTube for more the high level evergreen. What's the big topics in FPL?
Exactly. Good. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there, shall we?
Please do.
Yeah. And whichever season you're in now watching this, I hope you have a good one.
Yeah. Hopefully we've got flying cars in 2030. Love it.
Very good. All right. Okay. Cheers, Josh.
Cheers, Jack.
See you
Take
soon.
care.
Bye.
Bye.